Hello YouTube and welcome back to another alternate history video. And today I got the 2016 election, which of course is held between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. Over in this scenario, here I got John Kasich, the former governor of Ohio, and Bernie Sanders, the current senator from Vermont. Now, of course, both of these gentlemen did run in 2016, but of course fell short in the primary, Sanders falling short to Clinton, and Kasich, I believe, coming in third, falling short to Cruz and Trump. So anyway, like I said, I got these two if they did win their party's nominations in 2016. Now, of course, Sanders ran more as like a populist Democrat in the 2016 primary, so he was able to win states like Wisconsin and Michigan in the primary against Clinton. However, he did lose them to Biden 4 years later as he took a more hard left turn. And Kasich ran as a moderate Republican. I believe the only state he won was some state of Ohio. However, he never really gained traction as the base united around Trump. At least the base that voted in, like the citizens, but of course the establishment Republicans tried to block Trump's nomination, and they wanted different guys to run for third party. Of course, Evan McMullin was an over-Trumper who ran as a third party, try to stop Trump, but of course that failed. Of course, his best performing state was Utah because that's Mormon heavy. However, that's besides the point. Like I said, these two I got them as the nominees, and I believe Kasich would probably be favored in this. Of course, Sanders, I believe, could win like the Rust Belt still because of him winning in the primary and actually having working class appeal more than he did in 2020. However, I think Kasich could probably be favored everywhere else because I believe Sanders would be seen as too far left. And of course, Sanders' strongest base would be younger people. However, most of the Democratic Party, of course, is more moderate. So that's why they like the Hillary Biden types more, and that's why Sanders ended up failing in the primary because he was still seen as too far left for a good portion of the Democratic base and the electorate in general, with Republicans too, independents. So anyway, let's get into this. I believe Washington, Oregon, and California are all going to go Sanders still, like it did Clinton, because they did win the primaries in Washington and Oregon, I believe. I think Clinton won the primary in California. I could be wrong, but I believe these states are still solid to go for Sanders because they're really progressive on economic and social issues. I think Kasich could make it a little closer, like in Washington and Oregon, but I think it would still be a solid margin for Sanders because, like I said, Kasich isn't moderate, so he could appeal being a moderate on social issues and physical conservatism. So I believe he could make them states a little closer, but probably by a couple points or so. But I believe they would still go Sanders solidly. I believe Kasich, of course, would take the Mountain West here, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, Utah, and the Mormon Belt. I don't think Evan McMullin would have ran in this case if Kasich was a nominee since he isn't Trump. So I believe these are solidly good for Kasich, as well as North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska. I think Kasich probably would take the second district in this case. Bernie could maybe make it a little closer because I think he actually had a decent appeal in Nebraska in the primary, but I think in a general election would solidly go for Kasich, as well as Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. I believe solidly go for him. I don't see Bernie having any appeal here in the South, especially because of democratic socialism. They would get turned off by that, as well as the deep South there, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, South Carolina, Indiana here, Missouri. So I believe these states are always solid for Kasich. Like I said, the South there will be turned off by democratic socialism, especially in states like Florida and Georgia, especially the Cuban voters. They wouldn't like Bernie's socialist policies as he proclaimed to be. I believe they would definitely be turned off by that. So I say these states definitely one solid for Kasich. Illinois here, I believe, would go for Sanders solidly. Of course, because of Chicago, I could see Kasich definitely a little better than state. Like I mentioned, Washington and Oregon made more of a moderate, but I believe it would solidly go for Sanders still. As well as the Northeast here, of course, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, and D.C. Of course, where Bernie's from, in his home state, Vermont, obviously. New York, I will give it to him as well. New Hampshire, I think, would be a close one. I'll come back to that. I believe Kasich over here would take Alaska. Hawaii would go to Sanders. They do in the primary here. A great support, so I believe that state would overwhelmingly vote for him. Excuse me. So now the rest of these battleground states here. Let's start with over here with these western states. Colorado did go for Sanders in the primary, I believe, because of the issue of like weed and stuff. Of course, Sanders is pro weed. I think Kasich was actually against legalization of marijuana earlier on, but I believe I read on the Wikipedia page that he actually favored medical marijuana later on, like in his 2015-16 run. So I could see Kasich actually doing pretty decent here, and of course, being a moderate on social issues, I could see him doing pretty well here, like Romney did in 2012. But I believe this would still go Sanders since he's doing the primary here, and as a Colorado trending as a very Democratic state for the past 10 years, as well as New Mexico. Like I said, I could see Kasich doing pretty decent in the states like Romney did, especially Colorado. But with Sanders running the primary in these states and with how much they've trended blue, I believe if he would win these, probably about 5 points, at least in Colorado, probably like a 2012 margin, like I mentioned, or maybe even 2016, because I believe it actually was closer in 2016 with Gary Johnson on the ballot, especially. But I believe we'll still go Sanders in the end. I believe Kasich could actually take Arizona pretty solidly in this case because I believe Sanders didn't really make it close here in the primary because of the suburbs in the states, Maricopa and things like that would overwhelmingly go for Kasich because they wouldn't like democratic socialism like I've talked about in these other states. I believe Nevada would be a close one as well, but I could actually see Kasich pulling out a bit of an upset here because he would do great in the rural parts, and I believe he could actually do good in Clark County and flip it. Sanders actually did win the primary in the state 4 years later, but he was able to up his strength with Latinos and things like that. But in 2016, it did go for Hillary in the primary, and because of that, I could actually see Kasich winning this state. If this was a 2020 election, I probably would give it to Sanders, and maybe he could still pull it off in this timeline in this 2016 election. But I think with Kasich being modern enough, especially on things like immigration and social issues, as Nevada tends to be a more moderate, kind of like libertarian-like state, and that's what Kasich is. He's kind of like a libertarian-like conservative, or he's like physical conservative and like moderate to almost liberal on social issues. So I think Kasich would be a good fit for a state, so I will give it to him because of Clark County. Minnesota up here, I believe, would probably be pretty solid for Sanders because he did win in the primary in 2016. And of course, Minneapolis, I think Kasich could do decent here, like I mentioned in other states. But I believe this would still go Sanders because of Minneapolis and the suburbs there. Georgia here, I believe would go Kasich pretty solidly because, like I said, Sanders does not have great appeal here in the South. Hillary had defeated him greatly, in the primaries as well as Biden did. So I believe they would go Kasich by a pretty solid margin. Same thing with North Carolina. I don't really see that being that close. Like I said, just Sanders was weaker in the South in the primaries. You can look up yourself if you don't believe me. Clinton and Biden both had a grand time beating Sanders here in the South, so I don't really see him making these states competitive, and I say that's solidly going for Kasich because of that. I see him winning his home state of Ohio, likely if not safe, because it was like a about safe margin for Trump, and I see Kasich pretty much making it safe, like probably 10 points at least, because they do in the primary, like a primary here, and like I said, his home state, being the governor at the time, he was pretty popular, so I see that probably being like a safe margin, like I said, probably 10 points or a little more. I see Iowa being close because it was close between Clinton and Sanders in the primary, and close with Buttigieg and Sanders in the 2020 primary. But I think the state would still lean Kasich because of him being from Ohio and the evangelical factor in Iowa. They definitely wouldn't like Sanders. So I believe this would edge out Kasich because of the way it's trended too, to the right. New Hampshire, I believe, would be close as well because Kasich would be a good fit for the state because he'd be like George W. Bush, where he'd be like physical and conservative and like moderate to liberal on social issues. So that's why I see Kasich making the state close. And even with Trump on the ballot in 2016, it was a close state because they really didn't like Clinton. They really liked Sanders more because they did win in the primary. So because Sanders did great in the state, and from neighboring Vermont, I believe we would go for him. But I think it would be by a few points because, like I said, I can see Kasich doing really great in the state as well, being a moderate Republican. But with Sanders having the Northeast factor here, being from Vermont, I believe we would go for him. Maine as well. I think all of it probably would go Sanders. Maybe Kasich could still pull out the second. But I think with Sanders just having this northeastern appeal, being from Vermont, I could actually see him winning all of the districts. Like I said, I could see the second being a Tulsa, but I think with this Sanders being on the ballot, it would probably edge him out. But I believe the second would be definitely close. However, I think if I had to go with my gut, it would go all to Sanders being from Vermont here, like I mentioned. Now, the rest of the states, I believe my home state, Virginia, of course, it has trended blue now for the past 10 years. It did go for Clinton because she did have Tim Kaine on the ticket. But Sanders did not do well here in the primary. Like I mentioned with these other southern states, he definitely got defeated here heavily. And because of Kasich being a moderate, I could see Kasich doing great in the suburbs and rural parts of the state. So I think the state would actually go for him in a rare case. Because, like I said, Sanders did not have great support here in the primaries in these southern states. So I believe that would solidly go for Kasich, actually, because, of course, like I said, with him being a moderate, I could see him doing great in the suburbs in the state. And now the rest of these states, Pennsylvania, Kasich actually was born here in Pennsylvania, I believe, and he's from Ohio, so I could see him doing great in the state. I could actually see him winning Erie, because I believe Erie did actually go for Hillary in the 2016 primary. I could see him doing great here, like I said, in western Pennsylvania. And even Eastern, I think Bernie would do great in Western Pennsylvania as well, because I believe he did in the primary. However, the Philadelphia suburbs did go for Hillary by substantial margins because they didn't like Bernie's Democratic Socialist policies. They proposed, because I think the state would actually go Kasich because he'd be a good fit for it. Like I mentioned, in other states being a moderate and doing great in the suburbs because Sanders, struggled in the Philly suburbs. So for that reason, I believe we would go for Kasich by a few points. Florida here, I believe, would be pretty solid for Kasich. Because, like I said, as I mentioned, in the southern states, Bernie didn't do great here in the primary, and I believe the Cubans would be turned off by him. So I believe this state would be probably 5 points or more for Kasich, if I had to guess. And this just leaves Wisconsin, Michigan, which did go for Sanders in the primaries, and because of that, I believe they would go for him in this scenario. What's my screen doing here? One white. Oh, there we go. That was weird. Anyway, like I was saying, I believe the states would go for Bernie because they did win him in the primary because he actually had a great working class appeal in these states when he ran as a more populist Democrat back in 2016. So I could see that. I could see Kasich, of course, doing well in these states, definitely in the rural parts, but I believe with Sanders having that working class appeal in 2016, I believe he would actually take these since he won him in the primary. But that's not enough, as Kasich actually is the victor in this scenario, giving him 298 electoral votes to Sanders 240. Now I could see Kasich probably winning a few more states maybe, but I think since Sanders did run as more of a populist Democrat, I believe he would hang on to the Rust Belt here. I think if this was 2020, he'd probably lose it since he did lose it to Biden in the primary, but since he did have a little more populist appeal in 2016, I think he could take these states because of that. But like I said, this does leave Kasich the victor still with 298 to Sanders 240. If you like this video, just like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and I'll see you next time.